In this video, we're going to be taking a look at creating an embroidery design from a file that someone had sent me. And I would encourage you that if you have a design that you'd like to see demonstrated, how we'd go about converting it into an embroidery file, to send that to our email address that's in the video description below, and we'd be happy to consider it for a video tutorial. So let's go ahead and import the files that were sent to me. This was the file that was sent to me, so let me go ahead and do that first. Let's see if I can find it here. This was a test file that she was working on and wanted to see how to go about converting this into an embroidery file. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to bring in the original file that she started with, so we can kind of go back to the beginning here. So this is, let's find it here. This file that she started with happens to be SVG, so we're just going to import that and accept the defaults there. So you can see there, and all she did was just rotate it just a little bit. Now she wanted to add the LVE, so I'm going to right click and ungroup that, and we're just going to peel off. I'm not sure what font this was, so we're just going to peel that off, resize it here. If we pull from the corner, it constrains the height and width. Now obviously that's a little bit big, so we can move this in, or we can shrink this up a little bit. We'll have to shrink it up just a little bit here. Mainly want to focus on the positioning of our L. Make it a little bit smaller. Get our position there correct. And then we can always come in here and move the VE. So now I basically have the layout that I was looking for. So now what I'm going to do is, I don't really like working in groups too much, so I'm going to right click and ungroup. So now all this stuff is all individual pieces. So now the next step is I'm going to resize the entire design to the finished size of my embroidery, which in this case is going to be 3.5 inches wide. So we're going to make a left chest design. So we'll just, for our width here, we'll just put it in, go back to inches here. And we're going to make it 3.5 inches wide. Now we do have the lock on, so that when we change the width, we automatically change the height. And there we go. All right. So this is what we're beginning with. Now, the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to stitch this out? Are we going to be using fill stitches? Are we going to be using satin stitches? Are we going to be doing applique? Well, I mean, how is this actually going to work out? And in our case, this entire design is going to be satin stitches. Okay, this is a small left chest design, so all of these elements should work well to convert to satin stitches. Now, we don't like to repeat work, and so here we have 3 paws that are identical. So I'm going to create a new layer and put all of the top 2 paws. We're just going to right click and choose move to, and we're going to move it to layer 2. Okay, we don't actually need to look at layer 2 right now. This is what we're going to focus on digitizing. And there's a variety of ways to go about doing this. But the next thing I want to do is, I want to say my heart is going to be red. So I'm going to select my heart shape and just left click my mouse, and that will change the fill to red. Now, the paw, I am going to go ahead and stitch that out in black, but the love I do want to stitch out in red. But we have an issue here. Not really an issue per se, but what we have here is we have a shape. If we go over to our stroke and fill, you will see that it currently has 0 paint. I have the L selected. It has no paint, and I want it to have paint, so we're going to go ahead and give it a black color. But it has a stroke, and I do not want a stroke, so I'm going to shift click on the red X. I'm going to select these 2, shift click on the red X, and then left click, and now we have fill. Okay, so now we are ready to convert to embroidery. So the first thing I just want to point out to you, that when we're dealing with satin stitches, is a general rule of embroidery. if I grab my measure tool by hitting the M key on my keyboard and I measure, the width of my L here is approximately 4 millimeters, and that's fine. Typically, when we're dealing with satin stitches, we don't want to extend beyond 7, 8, 9 millimeters, really at the very most, for a wearable garment. And the reason being is a long satin stitch has more of a tendency to snag on stuff. So I want to see how wide this piece of my paw is here. And if I switch back over to millimeters, you'll see that the paw is 13 millimeters. So it's really at the maximum, beyond the maximum of what ideally we would want for a satin stitch. But it's okay. For this particular example, we're just going to run with it. Okay, and we'll deal with this here, the satin stitch issue, momentarily. All right, so let's just start with our heart shape. So in the latest version of InkScape and the latest version of InkStitch, there's a really nifty new tool called Fill to Satin. And this is what we're going to use to convert this heart shape to satin. So the way we're going to do this is simply grab our pencil tool. So it's the P key on our keyboard, or it's right here, pencil. And we're just going to click and click. And so you see here, we have this line, but we don't. We don't have a line there. Well, we do, but we can't see it. Even though you could clearly see there is a fill applied, but we need the stroke paint. So we need the stroke paint, okay? But back over on fill, we can't have any fill, no paint. We only can have strokes. When we're dealing with rungs, we can only have stroke paint. Now, if you can't see your stroke paint, see, we have stroke applied, but we can't see it. It's most likely your alpha channel. Bump that up to 100%. Now we can see it. Okay? So now that we have that applied, we can go ahead and continue to add click and click. Okay? We can go ahead and continue to add rungs. Now, the more you use this tool, the more you'll understand where to place your rungs and how many rungs to place. But if you look at this pretty simple heart shape, we have a rung right here in the middle, a couple of intermediary rungs, a rung right here at the top of the arc here, then another one, and then another one. I am going to go ahead and throw in 2 more right here, something like this. Okay, there we go. So now what we can do is we can select all those rungs we just created. So if we click here, you see this is path 1-2, but then we have from here all the way up to here. Okay, those are all of the rungs. And then we're going to select our heart shape as well. So shift click on that, and then we can go to extensions, InkStitch, come down here to Tool Satin, and we'll choose Fill to Satin. Okay, we won't have any of these options selected, just hit apply. And now that has in fact been converted to satin stitches. If we go to InkStitch, extensions, InkStitch params, we're going to be able to see those satin stitches that were just created. We turn off our needle points here, and you can see that this is pretty good. Now, there is one little nag that I have, and I really don't like the angle of these stitches or the angle of these stitches. I would like to adjust that just a little bit. And the way we can do that is by going into our pencil tool rather, and we're just going to add to this. So we're going to select our heart shape, hold the shift key down with our pencil tool selected, and we're going to add another node, or a rung I mean. So there we go. So we could add a few rungs. See there? Okay, so now when we look at that in params, we should see an adjustment on those stitch angles at those places where we added some additional stitch angle information. So you can see here, now we're straightened out our stitch angles a little bit, and I like that a little bit better. All right, so that first piece is now complete. So now how we go about converting our letters? Well, it's quite easy. We select our letter L, go back to our pencil tool, and we're going to come right across the top there. We're going to go right there, right? And then we're going to go right here. Now that's probably all we need. So let's go ahead and select all of those. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut of Shift-Alt-S to go into Fill to Satin and hit Apply. We have a separate video on doing keyboard shortcuts you're going to really love to take a look at. So you see here, one thing I do want to point out, see how that, because these letters were slightly rounded, that rail kind of goes around the corner a little bit. But let's look at that in params. And you're going to see that, in fact, it does do a really good job of having some satin stitches. So now we're done there. So now what are we going to do here with our V? Well, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to cap it. We're going to cap it. We're going to run one right down the middle. And we're going to come in here, and we're going to come this way, and we're going to come that way. And that's really all we need. So now we're going to go ahead and select this, and Shift-Alt-S. Again, I'm using my keyboard shortcut, Fill to Satin. Hit Apply. You're going to see that now if I go into params, you'll see we get another excellent result. Okay, very, very straightforward. Now I should point out we don't need to do these one by one. I'm simply doing them one by one just to kind of show you this progression, this process. All right, so now what about the letter E? Now, this is a whole different ball game. And this is going to take a little bit, just a little bit of understanding how Fill to Satin works. But if we understand how Fill to Satin works, boom, man, we can convert anything. So, back to our pencil tool. We're going to cap it. We are going to cap it. And we're going to cap it. Okay, step one. Then, corners. There's a corner. And there's a corner. Okay, there you go. Corner, corner. Perfect. Now, what do we do about this? This is a special condition. We have a gap, and we need to tell InkStitch how we want that gap to be handled. And the way we do this is by creating a rung on either side of the gap, and then creating a bridge. This will tell InkStitch to start the satin here, come around, come all the way down, come over. Done. Okay? Now, what do we do about this piece? Well, what we're going to do is come inside the edge. So we're going to come, will become the rail. So we're going to come inside the rail. Then we are going to come outside here, and we are going to create a bridge. Okay? If we understand those principles, it's very, very straightforward. Now, I'm going to switch over to outline mode because I need to talk to you about something. But to get to outline mode, view, display mode, you're either going to have normal or you're going to do view, display mode, outline. And notice I actually have a keyboard shortcut that I can toggle between the two, Alt-Q. Okay, so Alt-Q. See how quick and easy that is? So we don't always have to go to the menu. But I do want to show you this, what's going to happen here. So because of the way Fill to Satin works, it's going to go right from that intersection to the top of this line, wherever that line is. And then it's going to go from this intersection to this intersection. So it's going to create a set of rails here. So we'll see this when we convert. Shift-Alt-S, apply the Fill to Satin, and then you're going to see what's going to happen here. We'll close that out. So this is our rail, and this is our rail. Okay. And then you see we have a rail now that's been extended over here, and a rail that's been extended over there. All right. So now if we look at this in params, so we're going to go ahead and select everything and take a look at it in params. Again, using those keyboard shortcuts, real time saver. You notice it stitched the middle part of our E first, and then the outer part, and the satin stitch results that we get are great. And notice that the vertical column slightly encapsulates the horizontal column, so there's no gap in between, which is excellent. And there you go. So now we know that all three of those letters have been converted to satin stitch. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to take a look at, and I think honestly what I wanted to do was I wanted these letters to be in red. So shift select red, and now those are all red. And now we have our paw to deal with. Now what are we going to do about our paw? Well, I just wanted to show you another alternative, right? We don't necessarily have to use fill to satin. And in this case, I don't think it's terribly necessary. So we're gonna just change it up a little bit. I want to do something a little bit different in this particular case. So let's start here. I'm just going to select that, and I'm going to double click and add a note at the top, and double click and add a note at the bottom. And then we're going to choose Shift B with this bottom node and Shift B with the top node. Okay, now we're not going to have a fill. We're going to shift click our black so we have a stroke, because we want to convert this to satin. So I'm going to go into params, and you'll see that we will have the option to convert to satin. And there you go. It converted to satin just fine, right? Apply and quit. So if I were going to do this, that's probably how I would do it. But I do want to show you that you certainly can use fill to satin. So we'll go back to our pencil tool. Let's go to our outline mode so we can see this a little bit more clearly. So there we go. See how I'm going to just nip it just barely across the top. Nip it just barely across the bottom. And we'll do one in the middle. Okay, there you go. So now if I select these, Shift Alt S, and I do the fill to satin, we'll essentially get the same result. A little bit different, but if I go into params, you'll see that we do in fact get the same basic satin stitch results as we did previously. So it just, it's really a matter of personal preference. So now I'm just going to go ahead and continue that method with the fill to satin. I don't really like rungs, so sometimes I will take the extra effort to edit nodes, but you don't necessarily have to. It'll get the job done. Okay, so now we've done two, and I just wanted to show you that when we do multiples, if we hit Shift Alt S and hit apply, it will go ahead and convert both of those at the same time. So if I select those two that we just converted, and I look at those in params, we should in fact see our satin stitch results. Okay, pretty easy stuff. There you go. All right, now the bottom piece here is a little bit special because we have a special situation where we have a bit of a recess going on here. Okay, and so this is going to be a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to double click here and just click right here in the middle. And I'm going to do Shift B. And then double click up here to create a node up here and do Shift B. Okay, now we can't have a fill, but we can have a stroke. So Shift Select. And if we toggle back, you see we do have our stroke applied. So now I'm going to go into params. And we're going to see something a little bit different here. So we are going to go to satin column. First of all, create custom satin column. And we have a little bit of a weird situation down here because we had that recess. And notice our stitch angle is a little bit weird too. So we'll choose apply and quit. Now, the way satin stitch works is if we don't have rungs applied to the shape, then it's going to use the node information of the shape. So let's double click on that and so I can explain what's happening here. So when we have nodes, we always have to have a partner. So you see here, this is the beginning and ending, so that's a partner. And then we have this one and this one, so that's a partner. Then we have this one and this one, that's a partner, but this one does not have any other partner, nor does this one down here have a partner. Okay, so you see all those various differences? So we can go ahead and hit Control Alt and add one, so he now has a partner. He already has a partner, but it's not directly across. And we really like them directly across. We don't like them at angles. Okay, and then here, we'll go ahead and add one there. But then this guy here, we could delete him. Okay, so there's a start and end there. Then he has a partner, he has a partner, he has partner, 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 partner. So now let's look. And part of our problem is going to be fixed. Part of it's not. The bottom here is not going to be fixed. But notice how nice and more or less perfectly straight across our stitches are. And this is a good thing. Okay, so what do we do about the bottom? Well, the only way to really fix this bottom, probably the easiest way, I guess you could say it like that, is to grab our pencil tool and we're just going to draw a line. And then we're going to grab our node tool and we're going to move, let's go back into wireframe mode. We're going to move this down. Not quite so far, I guess. Where we're just barely nipping that. Just like that. Okay? Something like that. All right? Doesn't have to be exactly like that, but something like that. And then we're going to shift click on the kind of this nose shape. It almost looks like a nose. But then we'll choose path and we'll choose division. Okay? Now if you look what we did, now we have this, which is separate from this. Okay? So now we're just going to double click here in the middle. Shift B to break that node apart. And so now you can see that we have two nodes that are in fact broken apart. Now we can go back into params and reset that to be satin column. Oh, we can't. See that there? And the reason we can't is, I'm not really sure why we can't. Let's take a look here. What's happening? Okay. So what's happening is up here, we do not have a node broken apart. So we're going to shift B, and now if we go into params, now we should see that. There it is. Satin column, create custom satin column, and now you can see that we do in fact have a nice piece there. Okay, so now that's taken care of. So now what we have to deal with is this last little piece down here. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to kind of do the same thing, but we've got a bit of an issue because this is still one piece. See that? And we need that to be two pieces. So I'm just going to do it kind of like that. And then shift select that big piece. And then we'll go path, division. And now we have two separate pieces. Okay, you see that there? So now we have two separate pieces. Now I need these stitches for these to still be in the horizontal plane. So we're just going to double click, Control Alt click, Control Alt click. And then over here, same thing. Well, we got that one. We could, I'll tell you what, let's just add one here and then we'll take away this one. And then Control Alt click. And then we're going to do Shift B, Shift B, Shift B, and then come over here. We want to do Shift B and Shift B. What is Shift B doing? Remember, that is breaking at nodes. All right, so let's just take a look at this so you can see what I was talking about more clearly. Double click on it to go into Node Tool. So you see how it's broken there and it's broken there. That's what we want. Over here, you can see how it's broken, and up here, you can see how it's broken. Okay, so now if I come and select those two pieces, go back into params, we should be able to create a custom satin column. It's only going to be a couple of stitches, as we can see. Nothing too much to see there, really. Okay, because there's such tiny little pieces. But if we look at it as a whole, then we'll start to see a little bit more clearly what that looks like. Okay, perfect. Apply and quit. Well, maybe not perfect's the right word, but we're there. All right. So now what I need to do is I need to set the stitch order. That's really important. And I'm going to start with this. Let's just start with the red. we are going to stitch the black first. So maybe let's do this. Let's turn on layer 2, and all we're going to do is, in fact, let's go back to layer 2 here. Let's do this. Let's lower the opacity of layer 2. So we can just barely see it, but it's there. All right, so what we're going to do here is select our paw, and let's put this in order the way we want to stitch. So we're going to take this piece, and then shift click the other little piece, and then shift click this piece, and then this piece, and then this piece, and then this piece, and this piece. And we're going to go to Extensions, InkStitch, Edit, Restack Objects in the order of the selection. Okay, so now those have been restacked. So now when we duplicate this, we don't have to restack all of it. So we're just going to position that there, and then we're going to duplicate it again, and we're going to move it up here. Okay, so layer 2 is now totally dead to us. Let's just turn it off. Don't need layer 2 no more. All right, so there you go. So now we could select all of our paw bits, and we'll move that to the very bottom of our layer stack. And the reason we're doing that is because this is how the stitch order is going to now be. Boom, 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 all the way up. Okay, so all of our black bits are stitching first, and then we want the heart, the L, the V, the inside of the E, and then the outside of the E. But we have a problem because the E is in a group. So let's just get rid of our group. Sometimes that's a little bit easier. Now, heart, shift click L, shift click V, shift click the inside of E, shift click the outside of E, and we're going to go to Extensions, InkStitch, Edit, and Restack. And so it's going to restack everything for us. Okay? So now let's watch. Start from the bottom. We have the little piece, the other little piece, the big pad, left, right, right. See, it's going to go all the way up. Okay? So now all of this is in the correct order. We have the heart, the L, the V, the inside of the E, and the outside of the E. So now we're ready to take a look at it. So let's go into params and take a look at the design as a whole. And we see that basically everything is stitching the way that we want it to stitch. Now, do we have a couple of issues? We do, because we have all these jump stitches that are happening. You can see all that's being depicted down here. And so you see this jump stitch, if we back all the way up to that first one, okay, we got an issue just right there. But then we move along, and I don't like that jump stitch necessarily right there. So that's a potential issue. So we can fix these things, some of this, quite easily. And then you see this big jump stitch right there. We got that. And then we have this jump stitch going from here to here that we really can't necessarily avoid. And then finally we have that one, which we can't avoid that one. So this is where most people would stop and not make these little adjustments, but I want to make these little adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So first of all, I saw a little problem here. I'm going to simplify this a bit. So we'll go to Path and choose Simplify. And you can see we have far fewer nodes at this point. And I do think I like that better now. And then the next thing I want to do is fix the jump stitch from the heart to the L. So to do that, we're going to select our heart, shift click on the L, and then we're going to come up to Extensions, InkStitch, come down here to Tool Stroke, and we're going to choose Jump Stitch to Stroke. There's a jump stitch there that I don't want to be there. So we're just going to make it a stroke. And you see what InkStitch did? It created this little line for us. Okay? Not a big deal. All right? And then we have an issue from our L to our V. We're going to deal with this a different way. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our pencil tool, and we're going to click right here on the L, and we're going to come up here and click right here on the V. Now you see this is path 57, and what I want to show you is there's the L and there's the V. So path 57 needs to be in between those and also needs to be red. So shift click to make it red. Now I want to add some params to it. And what are we going to do here? Well, the only thing we're really going to do is change our running stitch to, let's say, 5. 5 millimeters is kind of like a basting stitch. Now let's look at our needle points. So we'll click on that first icon here. And notice these 3 needle points here and these 3 needle points here. And that's because there's a lock stitch being created, which you see here it says allow lock stitches. So we don't want neither of those. We don't need lock stitches because we're actually going to wind up removing this. Okay, that's why we have long stitches to make it really easy to pluck that out. And if we don't have lock stitches, we can just pluck it right out and it'll go bye-bye. Okay, so we won't have a jump stitch there. And why is this important? Well, because when we're embroidering, in order to create such a huge jump stitch, what the machine would have to do is it have to slow way down, almost stop, make the jump, and then speed back up again. Now, if we had a machine that did automatic thread trims, same thing. The machine has to slow down, cut the thread, move, then speed back up again. Well, we're eliminating that. So we don't want a thread trim because we have a basting stitch that we can very easily pluck out after it's embroidered. And trust me, if I'm doing 100 polos with that logo on there, saving 100 thread trims is like saving, you know, the way it kind of works is for every thread trim you have in your design, you're adding an extra minute. An extra minute for the machine to slow down, trim, and start back up again. And it's unnecessary wear and tear on the machine because it's got to do all that. It's just not necessary. Trust me. Trust me, trust me, trust me. Better to pluck it afterwards because it only takes a second. All right. And then the other issue that we had was from the V to the inside of the E. So we're going to do the same thing. Extensions, InkStitch, tool stroke, jump stitch to stroke. And you can see I do have a keyboard shortcut for that, Control-Alt-J, because it's something we do all the time. Okay, so InkStitch is going to go ahead and generate that line for us, but we can just double click on it and move it up here. Okay, and then we can just have it come down here like this. Doot, doot, and then we won't see it. Trust me, when we finish this embroidery, you won't see that. All right, so that, I think, it takes care of all of our edits. Let's look at it in simulator mode. So visualize, come to simulator. We have to go to simulator to see these jump stitch changes that we made. So you can see there's all of our needle points, which I don't necessarily want. But let's back up here. You see that first little frog right there? We're going to deal with that. And there's a couple of more frogs here. So we do want to deal with these frogs here. And yes, so we want to deal with a couple of those things right there. But notice on the red, no frogs. We eliminated everything. And that's what we wanted. But let's keep on fast forwarding here. So there's our satin. There's our little jump. And then our big basting here. And then a little jump there. Okay. So no worries. So what we want to fix is we want to fix this. Because we really don't want it to kind of cross over our embroidery quite like that. So we want to fix that. And we also want to fix this little issue between those two little bits. So we'll fix both of those things really, really easily. So all we're going to do is click here on the little bit. Let's see, where are we at here? We'll select those two bits, and we're going to go to Extensions, InkStitch, Tool Stroke, and Jump Stitch to Stroke, and hit Apply. We're not going to see anything because of just how it is, because it's just kind of straight across, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and still do it. Visually, we won't be able to see anything here, but when we go to embroider it, we'll definitely see the difference. So we're going to do that all the way across. These are just little things that I like to do to really optimize the embroidery. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, the next issue that we had was when this pad finished, the next piece is this little guy. All right, so we want to just change. We'll select those two. We want to go back up to InkStitch, and we want to change how those two connect. So jump stitch to stroke, hit apply, and you'll see the line that's created for us. And all we're going to do is double click on it, okay, and move it up here. That's literally it. Okay, that's all we're doing. So here, where this one connects, we're going to do the next one. So we had this one, then this one, and we're going to do the same thing. Extensions, InkStitch, tool stroke, jump to stroke, hit apply, and then we'll just move this stitch just like so. And we can actually move it up here too. So at the top of that, and let's okay, that one is at the top. Okay, perfect. So there we go. So now that should take care of all of those situations. So let's go back into extensions, InkStitch, visualize, simulator, and see if that didn't resolve our issues. Much better. Yes, much better. So we have no issues whatsoever. You can see we have this little jump here and a little jump here, which is going to be no big deal to come back in and trim that up. I do want to back up here and see what's happening here. There's a little jump there that shouldn't be there on that first one. So why is that? What's happening here? Let's take a look. We've got that piece. Then we have path 58, and then we have this piece. I don't know what's happening there. We should not. Let's go into params this time. So let's just look at it in params first. Not sure what's happening there. What's causing that extra? So here we don't see it in params, but we are seeing that in simulator. So it's a small little detail. We don't see it here in this example. So I'm not sure why in the big one we see it in the big one. Let's do it again, because we shouldn't see that. Like I said, it won't be a big deal for us either way, but it's odd that it does show us that. And I'm not sure why. Let's see if I can see what's happening here. Okay, I see what's happening. This jump that we're saying is not from this piece to this piece, it's from this piece to the next piece. Oh, that's interesting. That really is interesting. So what I'm saying is it's from this piece to this piece is where we're getting the jump that we shouldn't get. So let's go to extensions, InkStitch, tool stroke, and we'll choose jump stitch to stroke and hit apply. And that should take care of it. Again, we don't see anything happening because of how those two actually connect in real life, but it is happening kind of behind the scenes a little bit. So we should see that be cleared up. And indeed, we don't have that secondary jump there. So, you know, devil's in the details. Like I said, it really wouldn't have mattered. So this frog is that thread and that thread. Otherwise, we don't have no issues. Now, isn't that nice? So very, very nice. So if we look on our info, you can see here, we have the thread jumps, which we can avoid. We cannot avoid those, which is can't. So, but that is a very good optimized file. That is what we're looking for. So if we want to just take one quick gander at, because I do want to show you this, if we look at the stitch plan preview here, and let's we'll just do an overlay over the existing design here. Now, the stitch plan preview takes a minute, so it doesn't happen real quick. But there we go. Now, again, the preview is sitting right on top of the model, So that's why it kind of looks weird. But if we move this, then you'll see it looks a little bit better. But so you see that little jump? We can come back and clip it. Now all these in between each one of these objects, those are microscopic. Okay, the little jump from the V to the E, microscopic. And remember this one, we don't have lock stitches at the beginning or the ending. We have 5mm basting stitches here. We can pluck those out, no issues. So we will come back and trim this, and this, and probably that, but that would be it. And for me, I would prefer to trim it than add the time for my machine automatic thread trimming. The other issue with the automatic thread trimmer, while it is great, there are times where when you're doing an automatic thread trim, it's really easy for the machine to accidentally pull the thread out of the needle. And it doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it's just another thing that slows us down. So if we can eliminate thread trims altogether and very easily come back in and snip those little extra threads, for me personally, I would much rather do that than let the machine automatic thread trim. But that's just my personal preference. Okay? So that's it. This design is a done dealio, so let's go ahead and click on File, Save As. Let's call it Love. Let's call it Love Paw LC. Now I've already, we'll do LC2. So if you want this design, just let me know. I'm happy to send it to you. You email us at myembroidery411@gmail.com. That email address is in the video description below. Now, just one little caveat. If we want to change the size of this, and one thing I guess I kind of did jump the gun just a little bit, in that we didn't talk about underlay at all. And we really should real quick. So I'm going to select my letters, and let's go back into params and take a look at a couple of settings in here. So with this satin stitch, we should have a zigzag underlay, in my opinion. We should have contour underlay. The defaults are okay, all right? But over here on the satin column, on the pull compensation, let me show you the extreme. So let's do 60% pull compensation. Notice how far the thread, the stitches are past our underlay, okay? That's the extreme, extreme pull compensation. And I normally don't use percentage. I normally will give it a specific amount. And notice this says each side. So if I do 0.4, I'm really doing 0.8, okay? And that's what I would recommend. But it really depends on the fabric that you're stitching on and a variety of different factors. So let's choose Apply and Quit. For some reason, we didn't get this piece. So let's go ahead and grab that. So you see it has no underlay. So we can click on this, use last settings, and there you go. Now it has that same underlay as well. So now if I click on that, go back into params, we should see our underlay, and we should see we do have underlay, zigzag, we do have contour, and we do have 0.4 pull compensation. So there you go. Done and dusted, right? So same thing here. Go back into params. We are going to use the last settings there as well. So we'll just click on Use Last Settings. Takes care of that. For the paws, I think we're okay to use those settings too. I do think there should be some underlay there. So let's go in and let's just throw that same underlay under all of the paws. Do the same thing. Use last settings. There you go. Okay, so now if we take a look at it, we will see that everything has underlay. It has the zigzag, has the contour, has push-pull compensation. It has it all. Now there is one thing I do want to stress to you is when we look at this in params, you see all of these crazy frogs. I don't know why the software works this way. I don't feel like it should work this way. It frustrates me to no end that it does work this way. Because all of that work that we did as far as adjusting, remember we adjusted the connection point here and we adjusted how this stitch is and all that stuff. We've already fixed all that, but it doesn't show that to us in params, and I hate that. I don't know why it does that. So in order to see that real stitch result, we have to go into and look at it in Simulator. In Simulator, it will show all those edits that we did and show them properly. You see that there? So if we back this up, let's take a look. Now we see a lot more frogs here than we should. Now, what's happening here exactly? So we have an extra frog there that we shouldn't. Yes, we have several extra frogs there. We didn't see those before. I see what's happening, but I'm not sure why that's happening. Very troubling. So what's happening here is if we go from the second to third toe, there is an unnecessary jump, and the third to the fourth, but on every single one. Oh, I don't know. We didn't see that before. So second to third, we're going to go to Control-Alt-J. This is our jump to stroke. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. We're going to go from 3 to 4. So we're going to go, let's try this again here. We're going to go 3 to 4 and hit apply. And that takes care of that one. Back to 2 to 3. Hit apply. So you see how using the keyboard shortcuts really cuts down on our time here. Shift click, Control-Alt-J, that's jump to stroke, hit apply. We're not going to see anything significant happen here, but our stitch result will give us a better stitch result because we won't have all those crazy jumps. But I don't know why we have to do that because that wasn't showing up previously. But we'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, so now we've done that. We've taken care of all of those. So now, let's take a look. Extensions, InkStitch, Simulator. We should definitely see a better frog result, and we do have the proper frog results. Yes. So we have this frog and this frog is for this jump stitch and this jump stitch. Otherwise, we don't have no other jump stitches. See that happening there? I say that. Not sure what's happening there. And then what do we got going on here? We have the same thing happening there. I do believe it's related to that jump there, though. But then this one, there's a jump stitch there that shouldn't be there, so we can fix that. That's no problem. I see what's happening there. So essentially what's happening here is this right here, this piece here, the V, is starting over here on the right-hand side. And we really need to start on the left. So how can we control that? Well, it's really easy to control into params. So let's go into params. And I'm kind of glad that that happened just so we could see this more clearly. So you see where the cursor is? You can't really see with the cursor until you go a stitch or two. But see how it's starting. Let's back up here. Starting in the middle. And it's doing a piece of it over here. But then it's coming back. And so you see how it's doing that? And we don't want that. So we want to start over here on the right. So let's go ahead and reverse both rails. And so you see how now it's starting over here? So now let's see more specifically where it's starting. Right there at the top left corner. So that's what we want. So watch what happens now. So now when we take a look at this, We'll go to Extensions, InkStitch, Simulator. We shouldn't see any thread jumps in red. Oh, we do see one. Don't know why that's happening. Let me back up here. Where is that happening at? So we're going from there. And I guess what's happening here, the reason there's a thread jump there is because where this line ends, it must be more than 2 millimeters. So, okay, let's do this. Let's just extend this line to there. That's it. Now, we should not see that pesky thread jump. But let's just see what happens here. Back to simulator. Ta-da! It's gone. So that was a problem. So, not a big deal. We got rid of it. And that fixes the problem. And this will pull out just as easily, even though it is tucked in under a couple of satin stitches. That's not going to be an issue. Okay, let's talk about one thing I didn't really talk about previously, and that is this very wide satin here. So let's look at it, and I'm going to go ahead and select all of those pieces because the issue is going to exist for everything. That's approximately 13 millimeters wide. So we'll go into params here. And what we're going to do more specifically here is look at our needle points. So you see how right here, because this is 13 millimeters, you see these needle points right down the center? We really shouldn't have those. Not like that. But the reason that we have those is because it says, let's find it here. Let's find the parameter. We cannot have our satin stitches that long. Let me look. Let's see here. Short. Gotta find it here. Running stitch position. We are going to random jitter. Trying to find. So we have our minimum jump stitch length. We find it here. We are in, we're in satin column here. So let's go through this. Zigzag, pull, reverse, swap, running stitch length. I'm not sure. Split method, defaults. Well, if I hit staggered, you will see that that didn't change a whole lot. Let's go back to default. Let's look at this. Let's just go ahead and set. I was trying to see what it was showing me here, but let's change the maximum stitch length for a satin column. Let's do 7. And now you can see all the extra needle penetrations, right? Because we did not want a 13 millimeter wide satin. So now we've fixed that issue. But what I like to do when I'm using this, I do like to use the random jitter. And let's just do like 50%. And so you see how all the stitches are just kind of randomized. And to me, that looks better. It still looks like a satin stitch, but it looks more randomized and you don't have those defined needle points. And so now all of our satin stitches are less than 7 millimeters. Should ultimately give us a much better stitch result. Okay, so I'm going to hit File Save again because now we really are done. The only other thing I wanted to point out is now that we have the file created in InkScape and InkStitch, now we can resize this thing. So, for example, I mean, you can resize it within reason, right? So, for example, let's just say I wanted to put this on a small kid shirt. And I guess right now the design is already at 5, but what if I wanted to shrink it down then? In that case, there you go. So we can raise it up, shrink it down, and it won't it won't hurt nothing, you know, within reason. Within reason. Now you can't do that on an actual embroidery file. It's different. So it's totally different. But now you can see that's what it kind of looks like when it's shrunk down to 3.5 versus 5. But yeah, so you have those options where you can adjust the size of it if you desire to. Okay, so there you go. I hope that was informative and learned a little something. I know there's a lot to it. There is. But if you just kind of break it down step by step, it should all make sense. Thanks for watching.